Hello and welcome. It's 10 a.m. on Monday here in Korea. You are tuned in to our mid-morning newscast on ARIRANG TV. Thanks for joining us. I'm Scott Thompson, filling in for Mark Broome. Let's take a look at what's making the headlines. The two Koreas are slated to hold high-level talks as early as this week, but the prospects dim as South Korean activists fly anti-Pyongyang flyers across the border, despite warnings not to. President PACT to the National Assembly. The Korean leader will give a policy speech before lawmakers this week, and while she's there, will push for action on a number of economic bills in talks with ruling and opposition leaders. And where to go from here? Protest leaders in Hong Kong call off a referendum that would have spelled out the movement's next steps. But our top story this morning, President Park Geun-hye will hold long overdue talks with the leaders of the ruling and opposition parties this Wednesday after giving a policy speech on the budget at the National Assembly. The presidential office of Chung Hwa-dae says the meeting will include the leaders, floor leaders, and policy committee chiefs of both parties. President Park is expected to press them for prompt passage of her government's economic revitalization bills and for next year's budget bill. This will be the president's second meeting with both party leaders since September of last year and her first with the floor leaders since July. And it appears Seoul and Washington will maintain a joint decision-making process in their revised civilian nuclear energy pact. Citing diplomatic sources, South Korea's Yonhap News Agency reports the two sides are negotiating the thorny reprocessing and enrichment issues for the revised agreement, which should replace the current one by March 2016. Seoul wants more autonomy on the matter, while Washington is reluctant to allow it in line with its non-proliferation policies. In that regard, the two sides are reportedly considering easing some restrictions on Seoul's decision to reprocess fuel for research and development. The foreign and defense ministers of the two countries said significant progress was made in negotiations at their recent 2+2 meeting in Washington. Over to a lack of progress between the two Koreas. There are growing questions today about whether North and South Korea will hold high-level talks in the coming days as previously agreed. This after South Korean activists flew anti-Pyongyang leaflets across the border over the weekend. Attention now shifts to the reaction out of Pyongyang, which has repeatedly warned of grave consequences for such actions. Choi Yoo-sun has more.
Despite strong resistance from progressive civic groups in Seoul and South Korean businesses at the Inter-Korean Kaesang Industrial Complex, conservative activists in South Korea sent some 20,000 anti-North Korea leaflets across the border late Saturday.
We have decided to openly send the leaflets to show the public that brutality and violence cannot stop the dissemination of truth.
While Pyongyang hasn't yet reacted to the latest leaflet launch, it had warned of military action and significant damage to inter-Korean ties should the South Korean government fail to stop the activists. Acknowledging the leaflets do nothing to improve inter-Korean relations, Seoul on Sunday reiterated its position that there are no legal grounds for stopping the launches out of respect for the constitutional value of freedom of expression. A Unification Ministry official, however, added that the authorities have and will intervene if necessary to ensure the safety of South Koreans, either because of North Korean threats or an internal clash resulting from the leaflet launch. Experts here in the South predict the North could either carry out a provocation or walk away from a scheduled round of inter-Korean talks, demanding Seoul come up with a way to prevent further launches. Seoul had proposed October 30th for the talks. Others say that even if the high-level talks occur, the leaflet issue will likely become a bone of contention between the two sides. Choi Yoo-sun, ARIRANG News.
Another bone of contention between the two Koreas are economic sanctions imposed by the South, which are stifling growth. But a new report further shows that the problems reside much, much deeper. North Korea's labor productivity is more than 30 years behind that of South Korea's. That's according to the Hyundai Research Institute. It says the average North Korean worker produced about $2,600 worth of goods and services annually as of 2012, which is similar to the figure South Korean workers were producing all the way back in 1980. The report also shows that the gap in labor productivity between the two Koreas widened from 7-fold in 1990 to 21-fold in 2012. In contrast to its northern neighbors, South Korea is on top of the world in a number of economic sectors, but is falling behind in others, according to a new report. And as our Kwon So-ah reports, the gap between the two could be a stumbling block for the country in the future.
Korea is performing well in manufacturing and trade, but is still a step behind in quality of life and labor conditions, which could eventually hold the country and its economy back. The Korea International Trade Association's annual report, based on data from around 170 sources in various economic categories, was released on Sunday and shows the country's biggest strengths and weaknesses. The manufacturing sector continues to do well, as Korea shipped the largest number of mobile phones in the world in 2013, and its semiconductor sales and ship orders were the second highest in the world. Automobile and steel production landed in 5th and 6th place. On the trade front, Korea was the 7th largest exporter last year, had the 9th biggest overall trade volume, and the 13th largest trade surplus. Korea also ranked 7th on this year's Fortune 500 list, with 17 Korean companies on the list. Among the 17 was Samsung Electronics, the world's #1 smartphone maker, which saw its brand value go up a notch from last year to 8th place, and Hyundai Motor Group, the world's 5th largest automobile maker, which went up 10 spots to 43rd. Asia's 4th largest economy is also a powerhouse in the R&D and financial fields. However, the social and labor sectors are still far below par for a developed nation. Korea ranked in 41st place for quality of life, down from 34th last year, and Koreans worked the 2nd most hours per year of any country on the list. Korea's female labor participation rate stands at just 50%, and the nation's birth rate is among the lowest in the world, ranking 168th out of 171 countries. The trade association attributed Korea's uneven economic development to its rapid economic growth, adding the gap between certain sectors needs to be narrowed to achieve more stable growth. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
It's now been nearly 200 days since the Sewol-ho ferry sank in waters off Korea's southwestern coast, and 10 victims remain missing. Underwater search efforts for them continue to this day, with their families waiting in agony. On Sunday evening, those families sat down for the first time together to decide what to do next. They held a vote on whether to continue with the search operation for the 10 who are unaccounted for, or whether to start the process of raising the vessel to the surface. Families of 3 missing passengers could not take part in the meeting, but were represented by a proxy. The poll was held behind closed doors due to the sensitivity of the issue. Their decision is expected to be announced sometime today. And time now for a look through the international headlines we're following this Monday morning. For that, we'll turn to our Eunice Kim standing by at the News Center. Good morning, Eunice.
Good morning, Scott.
Let's begin in Hong Kong, Eunice, where protest leaders have suspended a referendum that would have addressed the movement's next steps.
Right, a move that was meant to encourage unity is instead putting to light the tensions that exist in this month-long protest that has been largely organic without a clear unitary leader. The main 3 groups represented, the Hong Kong Federation of Students, Scholarism, and Occupy Central with Peace and Love, had organized this electronic vote that was to take place Sunday night and Monday, but Leaders called off the referendum hours before it was to launch, apologizing and explaining that too much disagreement remained over the wording and also value of this ballot. They conceded that there had not been enough consultation with the public as well. Now, last week, Hong Kong's #2 government official, Chief Secretary Carrie Lam, had offered to submit a report on the public's concerns about Beijing's political reform framework. Protesters would have voted on whether they endorse this move and also whether they believe changes should apply to city elections in 2016, for the Legislative Council, and to the chief executive polls, of course, in 2017. New this morning, an 18-year-old woman from Guinea who was placed under Ebola watch in Australia has tested negative to the hemorrhagic virus. The Queensland Department of Health made the announcement just hours ago of the woman who was isolated Sunday at a Brisbane hospital after developing a fever the day before. She and her family were placed under house quarantine upon arrival from Guinea 12 days ago, per Australians' guidelines. She will undergo a second test on Wednesday. Meanwhile, the U.S. ambassador to the UN, Samantha Power, is on her way to visit all 3 West African countries, of course, hardest hit by the Ebola outbreak, to raise a call for a heightened global response. The number of known cases has exceeded 10,000 now, according to the WHO, and the number of deaths nearing 5,000, with most of them coming from Guinea, Sierra Leone, and Liberia. Turning now to Brazil, it's official. President Dilma Rousseff will see a second term as president of the Latin America's largest economy. With 99% of the ballots tallied from Sunday's vote, the left-leaning politician secured more than 51%, with her rival, centrist opposition Aisha Davis, coming in with a close 48.4%. Now, Navy's conceded his claim to the presidency, wrapping up one of the closest, most divisive runoff campaigns in Brazil's recent memory. Rousseff's win, also extends the rule of her Workers' Party, already in power for 12 years. It's also seen as a vote in support of her economic policies that have offered generous welfare programs. To Europe now for some business news. A highly anticipated stress test on the Eurozone's banks has shown that most of the continent's large banks would be able to weather a sharp economic downturn. The European Central Bank announced on Sunday that 25 of the region's 130 biggest banks, in fact, had failed the landmark financial exercise at the end of last year, but that most have since plugged their capital holes. It said the most problematic banks were found in Italy, Cyprus, and Greece, with some $12.7 billion in funds to raise. The test comes ahead of the ECB's expanded supervision of the banks, due to begin next month.
Korea boasts a strong film industry, currently the 7th largest in the world. Today, we focus on where those movies are being shown here in Korea, where multiplexes are adapting with the times and people's preferences. Our cultural correspondent, Park Ji-won, reports on their success at home and abroad on Industry Insight.
According to the Korean Film Council, more than 80% of the 333 movie theaters across the nation are multiplex theaters. And of those multiplexes, more than 40% are CJCGV branches, the #1 movie theater chain in Korea, followed by Lotte Cinema. CGV opened Korea's very first multiplex in Seoul in 1998. Since then, it has brought in a number of innovative features, including the nation's first 3D and 4D screens, as well as Korea's first premium screen called Gold Class in 2001.
The cost for this premium seat is 3 times higher than a normal ticket, but you can enjoy free snacks and beverages, as well as this spacious and comfy sofa where you can relax and enjoy the movie.
Another keyword of their success is cultureplex. CGV branches don't just offer customers premium movie watching experiences. They also provide a mix of things to eat like gourmet popcorn and things to see like exhibitions and even busking performances.
CGV provides better membership benefits compared to other movie chains. There are also a lot of restaurants nearby, and it has a good concession menu.
Lotte Cinema is another major multiplex operator, taking up about 35% of the market. Recently, Lotte Cinema opened Asia's largest multiplex movie theater at Lotte World Mall in southern Seoul, with 21 screens that can accommodate 4,600 moviegoers.
It offers premium facilities with a lot of amenities. The interior is modern and clean.
The new theater also has the world's largest projection screen, which has been recognized by Guinness World Records. Based on the success here, Korea's multiplex chains have advanced into the global market.
About 200 million movie tickets were sold in Korea last year, meaning one person in Korea watched more than 4 films a year, on average. This number is higher than the U.S. figure, so we can say Korea's movie theater industry has pretty much reached full saturation and is seeing its limit. That's why CGV and Lotte Cinema are focusing on expanding their presence in foreign markets.
CGV opened its first foreign branch in Shanghai in 2006. Today, the company has 31 theaters throughout China, 16 in Vietnam and 1 in the U.S. It also has a management contract to operate 12 theaters in Indonesia.
It's really about the movie-going experience, the premium experience of sound, screen, seat, as well as a cultureplex model. Ultimately, those things will work abroad, and that's absolutely part of our strategy. Now, in addition to that, what we hope to do longer term is really focus on the Asian content.
Lotte Cinema also advanced into the global market in 2008, starting in Vietnam.
We opened a theater in Vietnam in 2008, 2 years earlier than in China. Now we are the #2 movie chain in Vietnam, and we aim to be #1 by 2018. By then, we hope to have at least 60 branches in Vietnam and in China, with a goal of raking in some $300 million in annual revenue.
Both CGV and Lotte Cinema say they are focused on China and Southeast Asia for the initial phase of their global investment. But ultimately, they want to expand elsewhere based on things that haven't worked for them here in Korea. Both hope that in the coming decades, their branches that spread throughout the world rake in more revenue than those based here in Korea. Park Ji-won, ARIRANG News.
If you have your sights set on living to the ripe old age of 100, listen up. A group of local researchers may just have figured out the secret. Our Paul Yi shares it with us.
A research team led by Korean professor Kim Jong-in from Wonkwang University has identified the 4 most important elements for having a long life: national income, health expenditures, mobile phone use, and adequate sanitation. The team studied the factors affecting the survival probability of becoming a centenarian for people ages 70 and over, based on data compiled from 32 nations and obtained from the United Nations Development Program. They say a country's GDP and expenditures on public health are key indicators in the lifespan of the age, as higher figures indicate more elderly people are taking advantage of medical services. The study also showed that people who use their mobile phones regularly were healthier than those who didn't, because the phones allowed them to maintain good relationships through daily communication with friends and relatives. In the area of public health, the study showed that adequate sanitation facilities help prevent the kinds of infectious diseases that could otherwise be fatal to the elderly. The team said these 4 socioeconomic elements appear to have an important latent effect on whether a person over 70 will become a centenarian, encouraging public leaders to improve the country's public health policy. The final report on this study was featured in the online scientific journal BMC Geriatrics. Paul Yi, ARIRANG News.
And a good Monday morning to you all as we kick things off with the 2014 KB Financial Star Championship, which is the final major event of the KLPGA. And after an incredible 4 days of the event, it was the 19-year-old Kim Hyo-ju who came out on top once again. Now, with the teen sensation battling with Park In-bi and Baek Yu-jung throughout the third and fourth round of the event, it's Kim Yo-ju claims the KB Financial Star Championship title after finishing off with 12 under par overall to claim her third KLPGA major of the season. Not only that, with the victory, Kim also clinches the top season's money list in the KLPGA, despite a few more events left in the calendar. Meanwhile, despite finishing off in second place at 11 under par overall, Park In-bi is set to return to her #1 world ranking once again, as she hopes to hold on to that title for a longer period of time. And moving over to Sunday's V-League action, this time some exciting finishes on the day, starting off in the men's league where the Hyundai Capital Skywalkers faced off against the Korean Air Jumbos in Cheonan. Now a back and forth match as Hyundai Capital took the first and third set, with Korean Air taking the second and fourth set, forcing a decisive fifth set. Hyundai Capital's Liberman Algamez puts up 36 points, but Korean Air's Michael Sanchez matches him with his 36 points as well. But Shin Young-soo helping him out with 15 points of his own as the Korean Air Jumbos take the final set 15-13 and a 3-2 victory. Meanwhile, over on the Women's League, the IBK Altos taking on the Hanguk Life Insurance Pink Spiders. IBK's Destiny Hooker puts up a game-high 29 points, but the Pink Spiders have 3 players on the team scoring in double digits, including Rachel Rourke's 19 points as the Pink Spiders sweep IBK in 3 sets, 3-0. Now, some rivalries in sports are so big that there's a term used to name the matchup, like the Real Madrid and Barcelona matchup is called the El Clasico. And for KBO's Nexen Heroes and the LG Twins, their rivalry is called the El Nexico. And starting today, the two teams will square off in the second round of the KBO Playoff Series. Now, after the LG Twins eliminated the NC Dinos in 4 games, they're set to face off against their longtime rivals, the Nexen Heroes, in a best-of-7 series, with the winner facing off against the Samsung Lions in the Korean Series. While the Nexen Heroes have a better regular season record, the Twins' offense have been on fire, as Woo Gyu-min is set to start for LG against Nexen's Henry Sosa in Game 1, set to take place later tonight at Mokdong Stadium. And now moving over to Japan this time, where Game 2 of the Japan series between the Hanshin Tigers and the SoftBank Hawks took place last night, with Oh Seung-hwan helping the Hanshin Tigers in Game 1 for a 1-0 series lead. But in Game 2, it's Lee Dae-ho who helps the SoftBank Hawks get a good start to the game as he launches a solo shot in the 4th inning of the game for a 2-0 lead. With the SoftBank Hawks holding on to win the game 2-1, his home run was the difference maker here, as the series is now tied at 1-1. And from Korea to Japan to the U.S., where the 2014 World Series is currently taking place between the Kansas City Royals and the San Francisco Giants. With the Royals up 2-1 in the series, the Giants lineup came up big in Game 4 to tie the series at 2 apiece. Despite the Royals taking an early 4-2 lead after the 3rd inning of the game, the top of the Giants lineup sparks a rally, including Hunter Pence, who went 3 for 5 with 3 ribbies and 2 runs scored as the Giants rally back to win this game 11-4. Meanwhile, Game 1 starters to take the mound in Game 5 as James Shields takes the mound for the Royals and Madison Bumgarner for the Giants. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Good morning. It's a very cold morning. Last night's light rain dragged down the daily lows, so be sure to dress warmly before heading out. But we'll have a lot of sun throughout the day across the nation. But top temperatures will not be rising that much. Daily highs will be remaining below 20 degrees Celsius in many regions. So typical late autumn weather is in store for us today. With that in mind, let's take a closer look at the readings for today. Now, the low in Seoul started out at 7, and right now the current temperature is at about 9, and it will be topping out at 17 later in the day, while Daegu and Gwangju will be climbing into 19, and Busan will be rising to 21 later in the day. Now for other regions, Jeju Island and Daejeon will be making to 17, while Dokdo see highs of 13, and Mount Keungang only climbs into 7 this afternoon. Well, it seems like pleasant late autumn will persist for the time being before the rain strikes back on the later in the week, so please do keep that in mind. And that's all I have for you at this hour. Hope you have a wonderful start to the day.
And some beautiful shots there. That does it for now. Thanks for watching. We'll be back at noon, Korea time. Until then, goodbye.